Hello Year 5 and welcome to your reading lesson. So today we're going to look at identifying and defining vocabulary in context. We're going to be using a lot of synonym work today to try and work out alternative meanings to words in our text. So we're going to explore a range of vocabulary. We're going to read and infer meaning from the text. And we're going to have a look at a different question style today for vocabulary, which is called closest in meanings. This is where we use our synonyms in context to help us match a meaning with another word. Okay, so to start off with some of our vocabulary, if you have a look on page 49 in the page in front of you, there's a sentence, excitement that the boat swayed perilously. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the word perilously today. Okay, it's an adverb, so it's describing how someone does something. That's 4 syllables, perilously, perilously. Okay, and it's an adverb that we use to describe that something is done in a very dangerous way. So something that's full of danger, potential for something to go wrong. For example, the cottage perched perilously on the edge of the weathering cliff. Now, when we describe something as being weathering, that means that it's getting worn away by the weather. So if that cottage is perched on the edge of that mountainside or the end of that cliff and it starts to fall apart, that cottage is gone. It's going to fall off the edge of the cliff. So it's perched there perilously, so very dangerous. So we could say that it was perched there hazardously, treacherously, or dangerously. So any synonym or word that's going to suggest there's an element of danger with it. Obviously, the opposite of that is where something would be harmless, it could be safe, very unthreatening, okay, not dangerous in the slightest. So you could have that cottage right in the middle of the African continent. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's not going to fall off the edge of a cliff. So that is one of the words we're looking at today. So perilously. So it's the same as when something is full of danger. Now, one of the other words we're looking at on page 51, to see that conceited white rat again. So we're going to look at the word conceited. Now, it's an adjective. Okay? And in this context, it's used to describe the white rat, Gilbert. So it's 3 syllables, conceited, conceited. And it means to be overly proud of oneself. So when you might do something that you're the best at doing it, you might be described as being conceited, where you think, oh yeah, well, check me out. I'm the most amazing person at maths. No one could possibly be better at maths than me. No way. So it's to be very overconfident, very proud of yourself. Now, for example, in our sentence, Henry was so conceited thinking he knew everything. Now, another way to use the word conceited is not only can someone think very highly of themselves, but they're quite vain. Okay, and they're quite in your face about things. So this is Gaston from Sleeping Beauty, and he thinks that he is the bee's knees. He thinks that he is everyone's superhero. He thinks he's wildly attractive, the best human being that roamed the planet. And another word to describe someone like that could be to be very vain, obnoxious. Obnoxious is a great word. And you might describe someone who takes this almost a little too far as being narcissistic. And someone who's quite narcissistic is almost the very serious end of being conceited, but you'd more likely link it to someone being vain or being quite arrogant. So that's where you think someone thinks very highly of themselves, a bit like our word we looked at for pompous. Okay, when we looked at someone being very over the top about how much they think about themselves. Now, the opposite of being like that is to be very humble, to be very shy, very modest. So if you always get 10 out of 10 on your spelling test, and I go, oh yes, you got 10 out of 10 on your spelling test all the time, you might just sit there and shrug it off. Okay, so be quite modest. If you weren't modest, you would concede, yeah, well, check me out, always get 10 out of 10 for my spelling test because I'm the best person at spellings. So that's the difference between someone being conceited and always be quite humble, quite modest about something. So we're going to come across those words in our lesson today. Now, you might notice Miss Humphrey forgot that the printer that she's had for a very long time has a scanner on it. So rather than taking pictures that have been very blurry and don't look quite right, I thought I'd remember that I actually have a scanner. So I thought, well, I'll try the scanner. And look how much easier it is to read our beautiful pages. So now that you're able to see properly, now that you've got these proper versions at home, same rules apply. We're going to read the whole chapter today. So it's 5 pages. So there's 2 double spreads in the last page because it's quite a short chapter, this one. I'm going to read it as we go along with my own commentary. You want to listen along? By all means. You want to pause the video and read it yourself? Entirely up to you. Okay, so if you want to pause the video now and carry on, that's fine. If not, you can now listen to my beautiful voice. So we've got up until the point where they've managed to escape the warehouse and they've split off. Okay, so Firedrake's obviously gone off and done his own thing. And Sorrel and Ben have obviously gone off as well, and they meet up together. So this is now the next part before they start their journey. Okay, so chapter 7, Waiting for Dark. No one saw Firedrake as he made his escape along the canal. Twice, boats came towards him, but they were chugging through the water so noisily that Firedrake could hear them a long way off and was able to dive in good time, deep down to the bottom of the canal where rubbish got stuck in the mud. As soon as the dark shadows of the boats had passed over him and disappeared, the dragon came up again and let himself glide on. Gulls circled over his head, screeching, until he shooed them away with a soft growl. At last he saw a bridge beyond some tall willow trees. Their branches hung low, floating on the water. Broad and massive, the bridge spanned the river. Traffic noises drifted down from it, but the shadow it cast was as dark as the mud on the bottom of the canal, and offered the dragon shelter from prying eyes. Firedrake raised his head from the water and looked around. There was no one in sight on either water or the bank. The dragon crawled up on land, shook the dirty water off his scales, and settled among the blackberry bushes growing in the shade of the bridge. He licked his scales clean and waited. Before long he was half deafened by the noise above, but even worse was his anxiety for Sorrel and the boy. Sighing, Firedrake laid his head on his paws and looked at the water, which reflected the grey clouds overhead. He felt lonely. It was an unfamiliar feeling. So he's not used to being on his own. He's used to always being around Sorrel and being around Rat and around the other dragons. This is a very strange feeling for him to be in, especially around humans who are a danger. Firedrake had not been alone often, and never in such a strange grey place. Suppose Sorrel didn't come? The dragon raised his head and looked back along the canal. Where could they be? It was odd. Firedrake let his head drop to his paws again. He was missing the boy too. Were there many human beings like Ben? Firedrake thought of the two men who had grabbed the boy and tipped his tail, twitched his anger. Then he saw the boat. It came drifting down the canal towards him like a nutshell. The dragon quickly stretched his long neck out of the shadow of the bridge and breathed a shower of blue sparks on the water. So I think he's almost done that to try and signify where he is, that he's hiding. When Sorrel saw him, he hopped about in such excitement that the boat swayed perilously. So this is when the boat is going to sway dangerously to the point where one of them might just fall off. But Ben paddled it safely to the bank. Sorrel jumped out onto the slope and ran to Firedrake. "Hey!" she cried. "Hey, there you are!" Flinging her arms around his neck, she nipped his nose affectionately. So she's nipped it in quite a loving way. Then she dropped to the grass beside the dragon with a sigh. "You've no idea how awful I feel," she groaned. "All that rocking about, my tummy's churning as if I've eaten a death-cap mushroom." So she clearly feels a little bit travel-sick and seasick. Ben tied the boat up to a tree and shyly came closer. "Thank you," he said to the dragon. "Thank you very much for chasing those men away." Firedrake bent his neck and gently nuzzled the boy. So he's growing some kind of feelings or emotions towards Ben now. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "You can't go back there, can you?" "No." Ben sat down in his backpack, sighing. "That factory won't be left standing much longer. They're going to blow it up." "Oh, you'll find somewhere else to hide." Sorrel looked around, snuffling, and picked up a few leaves from the bramble bushes. "I know. Why not move in with Rat's cousin? He's got plenty of room." "Rat's cousin!" cried Firedrake with all the excitement. I'd entirely forgotten about him. "What did he say? Does he know where we must look?" "Well, sort of." Sorrel stuffed the leaves into her mouth and picked herself another handful. Clearly hungry. "But we'd have found that out ourselves anyway. One thing's for sure, we have a long journey ahead of us. Are you certain you don't want to change your mind?" But Firedrake only shook his head. "I'm not turning back, Sorrel." "Exactly what did the rat say?" "We gave us a map," said Ben. "The map shows it all, where to fly, what to watch out for, everything. It's great." Excited, the dragon turned to Sorrel. "A map? What kind of map?" "Well, just a map." Sorrel took it out of her backpack. "There you are." She spread it out in front of the dragon. "What does it all mean?" Firedrake looked at the tangle of lines and marks, baffled. "Can you read it?" So he was a bit confused. Baffle means to be a bit confused and unsure about something. "Of course," said Sorrel, looking important. "My granddad was always drawing things like that, to help him find his way back to the mushroom stores." The dragon nodded. "Good." He put his head on one side and looked at the sky. "Well, which way do I fly first? Straight east?" East. Wait a moment." Sorrel scratched behind her ears and bent over the map. Her furry finger traced Gilbert's golden line. "No, I think we go south. First south, then east," he said. "Yes, that's exactly what he said," she nodded. I'm certain he did." "Sorrel," said Firedrake, "are you quite sure you understand what these scribbles mean?" "Of course I do. Sorrel looked offended. Oh, bother these human clothes. Crossly, she pulled Ben's sweatshirt over her head and slipped out of the trousers. I can't think properly with this stuff on. The dragon looked at her thoughtfully. Then he stretched his neck and looked at the sky. The sun's setting, he said. We can start soon. Oh, thank goodness. Sorrel folded up the map and put it in her backpack. That time we left this city. No place for a dragon and a brownie. Ben picked up a couple of stones and chucked them in the water. I don't suppose you'll be coming back, will you? Now that makes me think that maybe he's going to miss them. It's almost like he's hoping that they're going to come back. So he's clearly built up some kind of relationship here, and he's either hinting that they want them to come back, or he might be hinting that he wants to go. So let's find out. Why on earth would we want to? Sorrel stuffed a few extra bramble leaves in her backpack. I certainly don't want to see that conceited white rat again. So there she's used the word conceited. I think he's very arrogant, very full of himself, Mr. I'm a know-it-all rat. Ben nodded. Then I'll wish you both luck, he said, throwing a final stone into the water. I hope you find this Rim of Heaven place. Firedrake looked at him. Ben returned the dragon's glance. So now they're thinking, Firedrake wants him to come with. Ben clearly wants to go as well. You'd like to come too, wouldn't you? Said Firedrake. Ben bit his lip. Oh, of course, he muttered, hardly knowing where to look. Raising her head, Sorrel pricked up her ears uneasily. What? She said. Come with us. What are you two going on about? Firedrake took no notice of her, but just looked at the boy. It will be a very dangerous journey, he said. Very long and very dangerous. You may never come back. Wouldn't anyone here miss you? Ben shook his head. I'm on my own. I always have been. His heart beat faster. Hardly daring to believe it, he looked at the dragon. Would you really let me come too? If you like, replied Firedrake, but think about it carefully. Sorrel often gets bad-tempered, you know. Ben felt weaker than his. Oh, I do know, he said, grinning. He was feeling quite dizzy with delight. He's almost got this sense of belonging, this idea that he's always been on his own and his heart's beating faster. He's clearly got a background to his life. Maybe he hasn't got any parents around. Why would there be a kid wandering around on his own? So now he's got a sense of belonging, a sense of, feeling like he's needed and has a purpose in life. Hey, hang on half a sec. Sorrel pushed her way in between them. What's got into you, Firedrake? He can't possibly come. Why not? Firedrake playfully nuzzled her furry stomach. He's been very helpful. We can use all the help we can get, don't you think? Helpful? Sorrel was so indignant she almost fell over. He's a human being. Only pint-sized, but he's still a human being. And it's the humans' fault we're not at home in our nice warm cave. It's their fault we're off on this crazy quest. And now you want to take them along with you? Well, yes, I do. Firedrake rose, shook himself, and bent his neck so low that the brownie had to look him right in the eye. He's helped us, Sorrel. He's a friend. So I don't mind whether he's a human being, a brownie, or a rat. What's more, he added, looking at Ben, who was standing there hardly daring to breathe, what's more, he doesn't have a home now, any more than we do. Isn't that true? He looked inquiringly at the boy. I never did have a home, muttered Ben, looking at Sorrel. So maybe he's been abandoned. He clearly hasn't had a happy start in life. The brownie bit her lip and dug her claws into the muddy bank. So now she's feeling guilty. The idea of biting lip is when you regret something you've said. Oh, all right, she murmured gruffly at last. I'll say no more. But he sits behind me. I insist on that. Firedrake nudged her so firmly with his nose that she fell backwards into the dirty grass. He sits behind you, Firedrake agreed. But he's coming with us. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some vocab questions for this part of the lesson.